I'm a heart patient. I'm sick. I've been robbed. I can't breathe.
Hurry up, send the rescue squad. That little boy is choking to death.
I need a rescue squad. The lady's taking an overdose of sleeping pills.
Well, we'll just send the rescue to Prison David. I think the little boy been killed.
Need a rescue unit and think somebody's dead over there. It's an old woman. We've been to her before.
The rescue squad, somebody done passed out on Haines Street.
I've got a man here I think has had a heart attack. I need somebody in a hurry.
Oh, I want a rescue baby. My daughter was going to have a baby, and she wanted to go to medical center.
We need an ambulance. I want to run this fell that hurt pretty bad.
A call for emergency medical help in this country is generally met with a shameful excuse of an answer. One leading U.S. surgeon has called it an indelible black mark on the forehead of his profession. This is a report on how one city, Jacksonville, has turned the grim tide to become a recognized national standard, described by one medical journal as a center of excellence in the emergency treatment of the sick, the injured, the maimed. A siren in the night, the rising and falling echo of those who hurt, that eerie harbinger of death. Medicine has grown used to its gaps, the gaps between a disease and its cure, the gap between what needs to be done and what is being done. On the average, ambulance service and emergency first aid in this country succumbs to one of medicine's widest gaps. And ironically, it's the one area of medicine that needs not to wait for any great scientific breakthrough. Yet vast numbers of lives are being lost in that chasm separating the scene and professional help. The solution is really a matter of commitment to what in some cases is a crisis problem, and admittedly paying a high price for its settlement as well.
10-10, fire 10.
We got a signal 26 of a small baby not breathing at 925 Edgar Place.
Rescue 2, engine 21, signal 26, small child, 925 Edgar Place. That is all.
Jacksonville left the dark ages of ambulance care to develop a system of on-the-scene medical treatment that in a few years was being recognized as one of the finest in the nation. The system, simply put, was to widen the role of the fireman and to bring trained medical help to the victim rather than the other way around. This is not an entirely unique system, but few cities have put all the elements together on such a large day-to-day basis. It is not an experiment. The system is laced with sophisticated onboard medical equipment, elaborate vehicles, and a versatile communications network. On this run, a child has stopped breathing. In most serious emergencies, if a fire engine company is closer, it will respond with the rescue unit. In this case, the combat fireman will be on the scene in 3 minutes, 2 minutes ahead of rescue. On an average, a rescue unit is on the scene in less than 5 minutes, a somewhat impressive figure when you realize Jacksonville is almost as large as the state of Rhode Island. There are 10 of these $21,000 rolling emergency rooms in service. The drama of this rescue unfolds rapidly as first the firemen arrive, then the rescue firemen. Hardly a word has been exchanged during the swift but deft motions of life-saving. One engine fireman will assist the two-man rescue team en route to the hospital to continue the mouth-to-mouth resuscitation and heart massage. The baby shows no signs of life. The receiving hospital is in direct radio communications with the inbound unit and will be set up by the time it arrives. Very little of the nearly $10,000 worth of medical equipment and supplies aboard the unit will be brought into play in this rescue. What is called for is speed and cool expertise. What an ambulance attendant did 30 years ago is far less important than today. A trained emergency medical technician can now do more in the field for such things as cardiac arrest than most doctors could do a generation ago. Drugs, counter-shock, and trauma control are resulting in salvageable victims. Prompt and sufficient treatment at the scene and en route are delivering viable and stabilized patients to the hospitals. The Jacksonville Rescue Service costs each citizen less than $1.20 a year, or a price tag of about $750,000. It's expensive, but the old way was expensive too. Expensive in the number of lives lost. Those elements that brought Jacksonville to the turning point in emergency medical treatment are those same conditions that still exist today in most U.S. cities. It was a hodgepodge of free funeral home services where white catered to white, black to black, regardless. Victims became victims of half-hour or longer ambulance delays and seat-of-their-pants medical attention. They were treated to a wild ride to the hospital and occasionally got rolled for the contents of their wallet. This, of course, did not characterize all the private ambulance firms. But more than once, a critically injured victim had to play second fiddle to a corpse while the funeral home improved its profit margin. By the late 60s, most of the funeral homes, which charged nothing for their service and frequently offered a like value, wanted out. Several private ambulance companies sprung up with teenage drivers and some attendants of dubious character. In Florida, ambulance drivers had to meet lesser standards than a taxi cab driver, far less training than a barber, and there were no minimal health standards. Competition was keen. There were fistfights at the scene, street races, sabotage, and run-down ambulances with slick tires and half-dead batteries. The news media were slow to recognize some of the gradual signs of a deteriorating situation. However, one television station, the then WFGA-TV, had for several years editorially campaigned for a fire department takeover and for a method of centrally dispatching all ambulances. Abuses and failings of the city's ambulance services were reflected in news stories and subjects of in-depth reports. In 1967, ambulance operators were on the picket line. The pocketbook squeeze was on. The public and some government leaders began to realize the predicament. Stringent new ambulance personnel and equipment requirements became law. Liability insurance rates were increased from $25,000 to $300,000. The operators rebelled with a street blockade and demanded a subsidy lest they refused to answer emergency calls. City Hall responded with a firm no deal. The night of the blockade, the bright red fire chief's cars were turned into ambulances, and the then 500-man department started a crash refresher course in first aid. The fire department was ordered in on a permanent basis by the mayor, and soon the city was receiving the best on-scene emergency treatment it had ever had. Planning also began at this point for something much more permanent. Within 6 months, the station wagons were replaced with custom-designed rescue units, 4 at first, 6 more later. But this facet could not have been done without nearly $300,000 in federal grants that first year, half that and the last of it the second year. No one knew in those early months what ultimate direction the fire service would take. It was offering good first aid treatment and extremely reliable service. It was 2 years later that a commitment was made to set a national example and to discard the typecast role of ambulance transportation. In a short time, the Jacksonville system had begun to outstrip state and municipal medical practice laws, and this was remedied by state legislation. The ride to prominence, however, did not come easily despite widespread public support. There were quite a few rough spots, including acceptance by a hesitant medical community, including the hospitals. A tradition-ridden fire department brought up on red fire engines, unexpected problems with police relations, and an uncertainty in the minds of many of the firemen who had volunteered for rescue duty. Time and training seemed to have healed most of those sores. One of the nation's leading thoracic surgeons has written that Jacksonville is the safest place in the world to have a heart attack. The reason is the heavy emphasis placed on cardiopulmonary resuscitation, called CPR. It's a method to restore breathing when the lungs have quit, a way to start the heart when it has stopped. Every Jacksonville fireman is required to know how to employ CPR. One local hospital reports that 73% of those heart attack victims who were theoretically dead when rescue arrived were brought into the hospital in viable condition. When the heart stops, the clock starts, and a system called cardiac red goes into operation. You'll see it demonstrated in the following film. The rescue team will immediately begin CPR, that is mechanical breathing and heart massage. The cardiac red will also bring out extra trained manpower, in this case a combination fire rescue company known as a squad. A cardioscope defibrillator, as well as drugs, will be broken out, and a radiotelemetry transmitter will be used to confer with an emergency room doctor who will be able to see a printout of the patient's EKG. The doctor can then prescribe electric shock and drugs for the stopped heart, to be administered by the fireman on the scene.
Okay, I'll take over. Call cardiac red, Don.
Rescue 7, this is a cardiac red.
Cardiac red, rescue 7, or sending you squad 36.
Squad 36. Squad 6, cardiac red with rescue 7, CTEL and limb turner. Rescue 7 requests you bring defibrillator, telemetry, and drug kit from their unit.
Okay, when that squad gets here, we want them to take over this CPR for us, and we'll set up the drug kit and the defibrillator, the life bag, and get all them wired up and everything. So they take care of the CPR. Check his eyes, see if we're getting good circulation.
Memorial, Leon.
Memorial, rescue 7 has a cardiac red. Have the doctor stand by the telemetry.
Okay, set up. We'll start getting those cables set up, Don. Start setting them up. Rescue 7 to Memorial.
Rescue 7, this is Memorial. We're standing by.
Doctor, we have a 55-year-old male, no cardiac history. Appears to be in ventricular fibrillation. CPR underway.
10-4, please transmit.
Step back, let's send this signal for a few minutes.
Rescue 7, defibrillated 400 watt seconds, administer IV and bringers lactate, 44 milliequivalents of sodium bicarbonate.
10-4 Memorial. While y'all stand clear, pull his shirt open for this.
Appear to have conversion. Appears to be normal sinus rhythm. We want you to continue to monitor the pressure, monitor the pulse, prepare to transport to the nearest facility.
10-4 Memorial. Got the vein. You got that butterfly going on? Yes, sir.
All right.
Okay, hold this up pretty high for me and get this medication in here. Okay, Bobby, you want to get a stretcher and a short backboard and IV right for me? Okay.
How about it, Jim? I've got you going.
The frying pan is no stranger to the rescue firemen. More than half the units are stationed in firehouses, the others at strategic hospitals. Like other firemen, the rescue men work a 56-hour work week, 24 on, 48 off. Their on-duty routine is similar but not the same as their combat counterparts. They do their share of dishwashing, bed making, and floor sweeping, but are not as highly regimented as the engine men. This causes a little friction, as does a separate rank structure. But rescue teams make 6 runs for every one made by an engine company. And rescue men get paid $1 a day more. Much of any fireman's time is spent in studying such things as fire science and the ever-important territory that is the city's streets and major buildings. The rescue technicians have their own study routine and are periodically examined. But whether firemen or rescue firemen, everyone starts out the same through a rigorous training academy program through onboard units or walkie-talkies. Frequently, when ambulances are thought of, the mind conjures automobile accidents. The results in reducing the death in automobile trauma victims in Jacksonville has been spectacular, to quote one expert. Such leading authorities have believed for some time that rapid and effective treatment on the scene could reduce automobile trauma deaths by 20%. How has Jacksonville done? 1971 saw a reduction of nearly 36%, while the rest of the state's auto death rate went up 8%. Not all of the credit, however, can be assumed by the rescue service alone. The traffic officials do cite it with a significant share. Despite an impressive track record and widespread public acceptance of the rescue branch of the fire division, there have been some thorny problems. As an example, the rescue team has the option of refusing to transport a person to the hospital, a person who, in the fireman's opinion, is not an emergency and could just as well take a private car or private non-emergency ambulance. All of their judgments in such cases have not been perfect, and even when justified, often caused ill will and friction, particularly with the family, some police officers, and even some doctors. Such refusals to transport are based on the department's policy of being an emergency outfit, not in the business of routine non-emergency hospital transportation. On-scene diagnosis and advanced treatment there and en route has had another marked effect. Prior to 1968, that is before rescue, nearly all victims were loaded in ambulances and rushed with red light and siren at high speed to a hospital. Most of the time, the patients turned out to be suffering only minor injuries. Of the more than 18,000 rescue runs made in 1971, less than half the patients needed to be transported by a rescue unit. And of those who were taken to emergency rooms, less than 5% of those runs required red light and siren. On the other hand, the rescue service takes great pride in its response time to emergencies. All calls are run X to the scene, that is with siren and flashing lights. On an average, a rescue unit is on the street and underway in less than 30 seconds after getting dispatched, and cranking up and pulling out in 45 seconds from a dead sleep in the middle of the night. The ride to the hospital costs the patient a flat $22.50 for a ride that costs the city more than $40. Only about 60% of the bills are collected. There are no charges for any first aid given on the scene. It's been known for years that large sporting events produce as much drama in the stands as on the field. The Gator Bowl game is a good example. The first year that rescue began staffing the game, there were 7 heart attacks. The most serious came at the moment of the opening kickoff. One fan dropped in total cardiac arrest. In minutes, the so-called dead man was in a unit parked under the stands being given CPR by the firemen, electric shock and drugs by a doctor who was there to assist the rescue team. The patient was revived, but he arrested again, then restarted a second time, and before the first touchdown was scored, he was conscious and talking. On the field, the University of Florida had pulled off a 14-13 upset over Tennessee. And in another way, the team beneath the stands had pulled an upset of its own. Before the fans had a chance to become tangled in their post-game traffic jam, one of their number was resting comfortably in the intensive care unit of a nearby hospital. On a cold, rainy February morning a few years later, a manufacturing plant in southeast Georgia suffered a major explosion. 29 died, twice that number burned. Jacksonville responded to the call for help and sent 2 rescue units to the scene and others to help shuttle patients from a helicopter pad to nearby hospitals. Though the rescue service is municipal in nature, Jacksonville officials have permitted units to go outside of the corporate limits in cases of mutual assistance. Now, the city is assisting in the formation of a 7-county rescue service for the critically ill and the injured in surrounding rural areas. Representatives from more than 100 cities from around the world have come to study the Jacksonville system. They say they're impressed with its degree of sophistication and performance in tough medical situations, such as the day the 2 circus performers shot from cannons collided in midair. But they say that they're even more impressed when that same degree of sophistication is used on the day-to-day routine call. To a young mother, there is nothing routine about her boy who is choking to death and in convulsions. She can't see beyond the horrifying blueness of his cheeks. Within a minute, the toddler is again breathing on his own and seeking the sleep that was brought on by his exhaustion and high fever. The rescue team was at his side 3 minutes from the time the call for help came in. Had this moment happened a half-decade ago, chances are an ambulance would not have arrived in anything less than 15 minutes. And the odds are heavy that there would have been no one trained enough to unjam the child's blocked throat until he got to the hospital. But that wouldn't have mattered, because had it taken that long to get an ambulance, it would have already been too late. Times have changed in Jacksonville.
Rescue 4, engine 15, signal 4 and 53, 56 in Maine. That's all. Signal 15, engine companies 9 and 2, ladder 2, car 3, on Boulevard, between the railroad tracks between 12th and 16th Street. 1026, car 3.
Car 3, 1097, this is a turned over bus, several cars in a wreck. Give me all amateurs you can spare. Make it a second alarm. Engine 9, 1097. Red 3, there appears to be no fire here. It's all first aid.
Rescue 3, signal 53, Penman Road and Beach Boulevard, 1 burn. That's all.